Welcome to Wild Mushroom Foraging in Texas. First, a little bit about Central Texas Mycology. We formed the nonprofit in 2019, and our mission is to strengthen the conservation, research, and study of fungi. And we host online and in person events ranging from walks, talks, and community workshops. And we are member supported, and we surpassed the 1,000 supporting members, and we have over 500 volunteers who become automatic members. And you can support us and become a member by visiting our website and learn more about volunteer opportunities. And so, a little bit about me now. So, my name is Angel. You can follow me at forage.atx on different platforms. And for a long time, I worked in tech and quit working for the man and am now part of the quote unquote Earth's internet. So I do a lot of foraging, urban gardening, a lot of outdoor education. I grew up in Missouri, have 10 siblings, and the first mushroom I ever learned was the destroying angel. I shared names with it. And so I also tried psilocybin at a pretty young age, and it helped me with a lot of early childhood trauma. But today we're going to be talking about foraging, and these are the topics we're going to cover. So, fungal life cycle and anatomy, safety and ethical guidelines, when and where to forage, why forage for wild mushrooms, tools for the hunt, and then finally, choice edibles and some tips on cooking and prep. So let's do a little 101. So here's an infographic on the fungal life cycle, which remains largely hidden. So mushrooms are the fruit bodies or the reproductive organs, the equivalent of an apple. And for most species, mushrooms pop up for a few days after the rain, then decompose, and sometimes they even get eaten by another fungus. And so many species of mushrooms or of fungi do not even create mushrooms. And so spores are kind of like the seeds of the fruit and are everywhere. So every breath we breathe about 5 to 10 detectable spores, and spores are dispersed by insects, animals, humans, the wind, and even seed the clouds and promote rainfall. So spores have about half of fungi's complete set of genes, and when a spore falls on a growth medium or the substrate, and the conditions are moist from rain, spores will germinate, and during this germination, fine, thin filaments known as hyphae grow from the spores, and then compatible hyphae mate with the fertile mycelium. And the mycelium underground is the most important part of the fungal life cycle. It's the vegetative part of the life cycle. And so this mycelium breaks down carbon based organic matter and absorbs nutrients from its surroundings. Much like a stomach, the more it touches, the more it consumes, and eventually gets enough energy to create a mushroom. And in its environment, mycelium encounters many competitors and predators, which it repels with an amazing array of protective enzymes and compounds. The mycelium is thought to be the immune system of the mushroom, and the myceliums are so tiny that 1 cubic inch of soil can contain enough mycelium to stretch for 8 miles. And so it forms this important communication network known as the Wood Wide Web or the Earth's Internet. And this web beneath our feet connects a vast system of roots from plants and trees all over the planet like an underground internet. And it distributes water and nutrients through this tube like network. And so about 95% of plants form this relationship with fungi. And so fungi are a large part of the reason we have soil and why all terrestrial life has a surface to walk on. And so without fungi, there would be no life. And so mycelium condenses into this hyphal knot, and then it develops into primordia or baby mushrooms, also called pins. And from thousands of primordia, the growing organism selects the most promising few and develops into mature mushrooms. Now we are back to the beginning of the cycle where the mushroom releases spores into the environment for germination, and those that land on a favorable substrate germinate, beginning the life cycle again. And so, mushroom anatomy and ID is a topic that is a whole class on its own. But we have a recording of mushroom ID on our website if you really want to get into that. But for foraging, I just want to note like 10 you want to note sort of 8 to 10 features of a mushroom. And it's super important. You can't just pick one thing like the color of a mushroom or like does it bruise or things like that. You have to kind of through process of elimination note about 8 to 10 features of a mushroom before you can validate and feel secure to forage it. So key thing, the substrate. So all species have a host plant or a preferred substrate. And so you're going to want to take note, is it growing on living or decaying logs or leaf litter or an insect? And so you want to know trees really well. Like you can't just know mushrooms, you must also know trees and know how to identify trees. So you want to look at the cap, the fleshy tissue that covers the top and sometimes the sides of a mushroom. Does it have scales, zonations, striations, warts? Is it flat? Is it conical, concave, ovate? Does it have an umbo, which is the nipple like feature? There's a long list of words when it comes to describing just the cap of the mushroom. So the underside is hard to see, but this is one of the most important features of a mushroom when trying to determine the identification. So this is where the spores are produced. And so you want to note, does it have gills? Does it have pores or teeth? Is it visibly smooth? And the fourth thing is there a leftover universal veil or skirt? Sometimes you'll want to note the spore color. You may have to do a spore print. So you want to take off the stem with a knife and then place the mushrooms with its gills or pores facing down onto paper. Then place a container over the mushroom and create an airtight seal. And then you want to leave that mushroom covered for a couple hours or overnight, and then you want to determine the spore color. And so spore color is something that a lot of when you look on a lot of mushroom identification, even the Wikipedia pages, they will note the spore color. And so you can determine, is it a Cortinarius versus a wood bluet, for example. And so the stem, the stipe, most but not all mushrooms have a stem to extend the spore producing organs above the ground and help the spores. So you want to note, does it have reticulation? Uh, what color is it? Is it woody? Does it break apart? You're going to want to look at the base or the vulva. The base of the mushroom is the stem that anchors into the mycelium under the surface. So you'll want to also look at the mycelium. Is it visible in the soil or the heartwood or bark of the tree? And most mycelium is white, but sometimes there's mycelium that's bright orange or black or brown. So note those things. The scent, is it apricot, anise, coffee, chocolate, almond, cucumber, garlic or onions, gasoline, bath soap, dirty gym socks, sperm? They are reproductive organs after all. So you want to look at the taste. This is not recommended for beginners, but sometimes this is the last thing you can do to narrow down a species. And so as long as it doesn't go through your GI tract, you're fine. So this is useful for Lactarius, Russula, Cortinarius, Gymnopolis species. You'll also want to note staining, so Boletus, and everyone's favorite chemical in mushrooms, psilocybin, contains mushrooms that stain blue. So now moving on to safety number 2. So you want to accurately identify every mushroom you plan to eat with an expert or two. And so, like we just covered, you need to look at 8 or 10 things to determine the species. And there's no simple guidelines again. You can't just say, like, oh, it's orange, I can eat it. You need to have 100% confidence and you need to look at like these multiple things. And so when in doubt, throw it out. So that's a good mantra to kind of keep in the back of your mind. And so many edible mushrooms species contain toxic lookalikes. And so learn what they are and don't just rely on photographs, drawings, or iNaturalist recommendations. You want to confirm it with an expert. So you want to collect fresh mushrooms, and you wouldn't eat moldy or rotting mushrooms from the grocery store. The same should be for wild mushrooms. So do not collect in contaminated areas, lawns, or areas where fertilizer or pesticides may be present. Mushrooms can readily pick up chemicals from the environment, so avoid collecting along busy roads or anywhere where you might have an old dump site. So do not eat fungi growing on ornamental trees. In some cases, toxins in the wood can seep into the fungal tissues. So you're not going to want to eat raw or uncooked mushrooms, and this applies to all mushrooms, even store bought. And so through cooking, this provides improved digestibility, flavor, additional nutrition, and the elimination of some harmful substance. But be aware, this doesn't happen with all of them. It doesn't eliminate all toxins, and you know it will not make poisonous mushrooms edible. So if you're trying a new mushroom, just try a bite for the first time and wait 24 hours before eating any more. And some people do have reactions or allergies even to one particular mushroom species. But a lot of times, people that do have reactions, it ends up being from them not being cooked well. And there was a famous case. Just look up Dave's Sushi in Montana. It was a big ordeal where people ate raw morels. So you're not going to want to consume alcohol when trying mushrooms for the first time. So wait until you're sure you're not allergic to a particular species. And so there is like one species from the genus Coprinus that reacts to alcohol and it basically makes liver your liver function that is able to filter the alcohol. It doesn't work properly, and I don't know all the science behind it, but I just know that there's like one species of ink cap that you're not supposed to eat with alcohol. So the forest is not your grocery store, and it's important to get out of that sort of consumer mindset when you're out looking at mushrooms. And so in this short video, Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, explains what does ethical reciprocity between humans and the natural world look like. And so here is a video. I'll try to play it. Actually, I'm going to link it in the YouTube video so you can watch it separately. And so seasonality and timing is key. It's a key variable. And so the ecosystem knowledge is next. And then knowing the laws is really important too. And so timing is super, super important. And so I made this calendar of the seasonality of wild edible mushrooms in Texas and also included their regions in the key below. So not only is that important, but the timing of your foraging trip with rainfall. The mushroom growth is also like plants. They prefer a range of temperatures, and if we get rain during that time, we will see mushrooms sometimes just one day, other times a week later. And so your time spent out in the wild is also super important. And you can spend hours getting lost in the woods. And so with this class, there's like a downloadable link where you can get this mushroom calendar to keep on your print and keep on your refrigerator. So Texas is divided into 10 regions: the piney woods, Gulf prairies, marshes, all of these here. And so it's important to learn what trees and mushrooms fruit in all of these ecoregions. And so that said, 95% of Texas land, private land, or 95% of Texas land is private. So finding finding private and public land where you can legally forage is a real challenge. And so, anti foraging laws, which were codified post emancipation and during the Indian Removal Act, when European settlers were stealing land, forcing migration, and trying to control and retaliate against former slaves and indigenous people who foraged for their survival. And so a lot of these laws are still legal in Texas, illegal. It's still illegal to forage in Texas. State parks, city and county parks, preserves, public property without permission. And so fines for illegally harvesting plants or mushrooms start around 202K. And you can harvest the above ground plants and mushrooms from Texas roadsides. But remember, that's where a lot of toxins are sprayed. And you are allowed to harvest 1 gallon of mushroom per day for private use only in 4 of the national forests in East Texas. You can harvest 1 pint of fruit, nuts, berries per person per day for personal use from the Big Thicket National Preserve, but mushrooms are protected. And so supposedly you can also find a list of on HipCamp of private campsites that allow you to forage on their private land. So, like I mentioned earlier, mushrooms have a host or preferred growing condition. So, knowing trees is super important. Some grow in symbiosis or decompose with specific tree species, some hardwoods, some conifers. And so mushroom fruiting occurs when it rains and there's humidity. So some within hours, some within 5 to 7 days after rain. So you're going to want to look near water and in humid areas. So the biggest challenge here is, Texas is very droughty conditions. So the average rainfall in central Texas is 36 inches. And in 2023, we had 19 inches. So in North Texas, it's about roughly the same. Although in deep East Texas, it gets about 60 inches on average. And so just to kind of compare, the Pacific Northwest, which is well known for all of its mushroom growth, it gets about 60 to 240 inches of rainfall a year. So why do you want to forage for mushrooms? So food sovereignty, you want to reclaim and redefine healthy and culturally appropriate food through ecological and sustainable methods. It's great for your mental and physical health and nutrition. Mushrooms grown outside have all of these compounds that happen during the secondary metabolite process. And so you can form a kinship with the land and the plants and the mushrooms, make more fungal friends, both mushrooms and human. Get in touch with your inner child, become a fairy. So, in some parts of the country, people forage for money, but I don't recommend that people uh, try that in Texas for a lot of the reasons that I've already shared. Um, lack of public land, rainfall, mostly lack of rainfall. So now we're going to talk about tools for the hunt. You're going to want to have a basket or a mesh tote, like produce bags are great. Bring multiple for separating species, but the great thing about baskets and totes is the spores can fall through and spread in the forest. You want a knife with a brush or a cleaning rag for wiping off soil. You don't want to put the mushrooms covered in soil in your basket because the soil will get everywhere, and especially in the gills. And it's best to cut off the stems as you're foraging and leave those in the area because they will help continue to spread the spores. And so you want to have a map, a compass or GPS. You can find your way towards water, the trails, and then back home. A lot of people like to use Strava, which is a way to kind of mark your routes and be able to find. You can even link your photos to Strava so you can see where your secret honey holes are. You want to bring like a smartphone and a camera to take your melfies, photos of your finds. And so, if you aren't sure about the ID, you want to make sure to get photos of the cap, the underside, the full mushroom, the environment it's growing in, the cross section, bruising. And so, if you have mobile data in the forest, you can use tools like iNaturalist, which is a free app that uses pattern recognition and recommends identification, but it's always good to confirm with the human. And there's a lot of Facebook groups that Alan Rockefeller has started for different regions of Texas. And Texas Mushroom ID has a lot of experts, so definitely recommend going to that Facebook group. So you want to bring bug spray, uh, of course, water, trail snacks. If it's raining, you want to wear your raincoat, rubber boots, have a backpack to carry all of your things. If you don't mind carrying a heavy load, there's a lot of really good guidebooks. So, Mushrooms of the Gulf State is the guidebook we recommend for Texas. I have a digital version on my phone, and I can easily search, which is great. So, recommend getting the print and digital copy. So now we're going to get into choice edible mushrooms. So chicken of the woods or sulfur shelf, which is the Latiforus species, is a great beginner mushroom because it's easy to spot. It's found in urban settings. And so we do a bike ride every year called Micropsycho to forage for it in urban settings. So definitely keep an eye out for that. We'll be doing it in October or November. And so it's a brown rot polypore mushroom that fruits at the base or at the trunk of the tree, sometimes perched very high in mature live oaks and red oaks, and with that have their heartwood exposed. And so once you see the fruiting of the mushroom, there's nothing you can do to remove the fungus for the tree, but it's slowly, since it's a brown rot fungi, it's only consuming part of the heartwood, and so the cellulose returns the nutrients back to the soil. It also provides habitat for woodland creatures, and this can still cause stem failure in oaks, so you just want to keep an eye on it. But there's not a whole lot of studies that look at like the cohabitation of these trees and fungus, and especially in central Texas and places like Southern California, where they also kind of grow on trees that are alive. And so, a lot of times, human disruption, the cutting down of trees, trimming of trees for roads, buildings, it's what opens up the heartwood of the tree. And as I shared, spores are floating everywhere and they're waiting for the right opportunity to find a food source. And so, on the plus side, they spit out this really delicious choice edible mushroom that contains proteins, fat, fiber, tastes just like chicken. And so, in this little video, I've shared a recipe for coconut chicken of the woods. You can Google that. I think it's the only recipe of its kind on the website, but it's on our community blog. And so, as far as lookalikes, some folks confuse oak bracket for this mushroom. And if you're just looking at color, Southern jack-o'-lantern, although the Southern jack-o'-lantern has gills, this is a polypore, it has pores. So lion's mane is a choice edible and medicinal mushroom that rarely grows wild in central Texas. And I've seen it growing on post oaks, and it's one that can be cultivated. You can find it in farmers markets, at HEB. And this is considered a tooth fungus. And so it's white and fuzzy, and it starts to turn yellow and brown as it ages. But the spores shoot out of the little teeth. And so it, it is found in the winter after rain. And so it fruits on the decomposing hardwood or heartwood of cankers or living post oaks. So it's mildly sweet in flavor, tender texture that mimics shellfish or scallops, crab, and lobster. And so not only does this mushroom taste delicious, it's good for you. Lion's mane contains bioactive substances that are beneficial for our mental health, our brain, our heart, our gut, and scientific studies have found this mushroom may reduce inflammation, relieve depression, anxiety, protect against dementia and Alzheimer's, protect against ulcers in the digestive tract, reduce heart disease risks, help manage diabetes, cancer fighting properties, and so the lookalikes, there's no toxic lookalikes in this level one of mushrooms. So the lookalikes are all other hericium species. So as dewberries blossom, the choice edible morel starts to fruit in central Texas. And these elusive mushrooms have a honeycomb appearance due to a network of ridges that, with pits composing their caps. I'm already thinking about how to preserve morels so I can pair them with dewberries. And so I found my first morels in Texas in the when the pandemic shut everything down. South by Southwest canceled, and I found in my newfound free time, I wandered along creeks looking under junipers for this honeycomb mushroom. And so morels are found to be saprophytic, mycorrhizal, and endophytic during different parts of their life. In Texas, I have found morels in riparian areas growing in limestone with grasses and duff near cedars and juniper, ash juniper, cedar elms, ash, hackberries, persimmons, yaupon, possum haw. And so they require moisture from rain. In the last few years, even this year, was pretty bad in central Texas. Although Waco and areas that had more rain, they did pretty well. And so some lookalikes, Gyrometra, Halbella, Virpa, genera have some toxic species, but a lot of them, they aren't. I feel like they look a lot different, and a lot of the claims of poison are due to the mushrooms not being cooked properly. So reishi, there's 8 species in Texas of this prized medicinal mushroom. So it's been used in traditional Chinese medicine for thousands of years. It's got antiviral, anti-tumor, anti-carcinogen, antibiotic. It's an immune system stimulant, aids in respiratory, it's antioxidant, anti-aging, all the good stuff. And there's a lot of studies on it. And so considered a polypore or a shelf mushroom, measuring 4 to 12 inches across, sometimes smaller, sometimes bigger. And it has this very woody texture and is brown to reddish brown with a varnished appearance with white pores on the underside. And if the pores are no longer white, the spores have already been released, and it's probably not a good idea to forage it at that point. And so you start to see them in the spring through fall, and they grow at the base or on hardwood stumps, logs, especially oaks, and pecans that have had their roots disturbed. East Texas can be found at the base of dead pine stumps. And so the flavor is incredibly bitter because of the medicinal compounds. So it's great in teas. And we have a recipe on our website for reishi, um, called Mush Love. It has 3 aphrodisiacs. It's also on our blog. Reishi, ginger, hibiscus. It's a really great tea. So lookalikes. The red-belted conch, which I don't believe can be found in Texas. Maybe, West Texas in the mountains. Um, but yeah, there's like another. So yeah, so that one's the look-alike, but it's also medicinal, so win-win. So turkey tail is a very aggressive decomposer of rotting wood, including ash juniper or cedar, and it has multicolored bands and visible spore pores on the underside, unlike its look-alike that has a smooth surface. So sterium or false turkey tail is the look-alike. And so you can find it in the spring through winter after rain. It grows slow growing in shelves and clusters. And so it's been used in traditional Chinese medicine and it's been found to improve responses to cancer medicine and radiation. It's also used for muscle strength, fatigue, UTIs, and many other conditions. And so, yeah, so since this one doesn't have a toxic lookalike, it's considered a level 1 mushroom, great for beginners. So, wood ears, so there's 6 species observed in Texas. And so, this jelly mushroom, it lacks gills or pores, and it's wavy. The cap is wavy, and it's like this ear shape, and it produces white spores. It grows in clusters on decaying hardwood after rain, and it can even rehydrate, so it dries and rehydrates, and if you ever find them kind of dried out, they will rehydrate from soaking them. And so it's a very popular ingredient in many Asian dishes such as hot and sour soup, and it's used in traditional Chinese medicine. It's even used in Ghana as a blood tonic. And so modern research into this medicinal application has um, variously concluded that wood ears are carcinogenic, anticoagulant. It absorbs flavor, great in soup, contains protein, iron, calcium, phosphorus, and so its lookalikes are also edible, but they don't have like quite all the medicinal compounds. So now we're into level 2 mushrooms, and this just means that these mushrooms have toxic lookalikes. So it's very important to know these toxic lookalikes as well. So take note. So yeah, chanterelles or the Cantharellus species. There's about 10 observed in Texas, and they have a slightly different features, as you can see in this video. And I'm going to give you common details and describe common species. And so they are orange, orangey yellow, funnel shaped, and can be found popping up as individual mushrooms or in clusters, as you can see on this video. And so on the lower surface, underneath the smooth cap, they have rounded, forked folds that run almost all the way down the stipe, which taper down seamlessly from the cap. And they grow up to 4 inches, but many are just a few inches and pack a lot of flavor. And so you can find these in the spring, sometimes into the summer and even fall. They need a lot of rain, like the torrential Texas style flash floods that we're all familiar with. And so when it starts to get muggy, feel like a sauna, lots of mosquitoes are out, so are the chanterelles. So they are symbiotic, they're mycorrhizal fungi, and they are found with mature oaks, pines, or sorry, pecans. I've seen them with red oaks, but primarily Texas live oaks, very mature Texas live oaks with a lot of leaf matter that make the ground spongy, slightly on a downhill, where there's no mowing that's taken place either, or like the understory. There's not a lot of understory, just a lot of leaves. You'll probably find some green briars and things like that. But trees that are near a creek and where water is flowing can be important too. And so many species emit a fruity aroma reminiscent of apricots. East Texas has red chanterelles and also a Cantharellus texensis. And so they have a slightly different flavor. They're very peppery tasting. So the lookalikes is the southern jack-o'-lantern, Omophalutus subuludens, and this is considered the fall chanterelle in Texas. So be sure to know the morphology and
Waiting,
the difference. And don't just eat a
already
mushroom based on color because I've seen it. I've talked to people that have done it and they were not happy. So, honey mushrooms pop up in the spring and fall in large clusters at the base of dead and dying trees. And so, when the clusters appear, sometimes to be like terrestrial, they're usually growing on underground wood. And so, this is considered a parasitic fungus, and it's in the same genus as the largest living organism on the planet, the humongous fungus in Oregon. And so in East Texas, you can find honey mushrooms in the Amarilla genus that have a sticky cap and a ring. So they're moderately sweet, chewy, sometimes of mild bitter aftertaste and a gelatinous surface. And so again, the poisonous southern jack-o'-lantern, the Omophalutus suboludens, which is also orange, but it also starts to turn brown. Gymnopolis junoneus is orange bitter, and that one's also contains psilocybin. That one's considered a lookalike. And then the deadly Galerina marginata, it's smaller and has a smooth cap, a stalk ring, and brown spores. So definitely a level 2. So what we're looking at now are oyster mushrooms, and you all probably know these because they are one that are commonly cultivated and sold. And so this is a primary decomposer with fan-shaped caps measuring 2 to 8 inches across. The gills run down the stem or decurrent. The color varies from white to gray or tan. You can find them in the spring, fall, and winter after rain. They grow in clusters on dead or dying hardwood along creeks. I see them a lot on black willows and oaks. And so, cooked, these oyster mushrooms are a great meat replacement in soup, stir fry, salads, recipes. And so, again, the lookalikes here is the southern jack o' lantern, also angel wings. So, puffballs. So, when young, it is relatively smooth and spherical and slightly deflate with age and turn purplish and brownish on the inside. And some peel, some have spines. So you can find these in late summer and fall after rain, like overgrazed prairies and grasslands. And so they do not have a strong flavor, but they absorb flavor. So if you're lucky and you find a giant puffball, there's like a few observations in Texas, the Western giant puffball. You can make a giant puffball pizza, which is there's lots of fun recipes online where people use the mushroom and they slice it and they use the mushroom as the crust of the pizza. So puffballs are well known by all Native American tribes in North America through use of various, and the uses are varied. And so some use them for wound care. Puffballs sometimes grew in fairy rings on prairies, and they were called, and the Blackfoot called them fallen stars. So puffballs and other fungi likewise were used as incense by these Indians in order to keep evil spirits away. So the lookalikes, some people say Amanita species because they sort of have like an egg. Amanitas sort of form when they first emerge. They are in this egg type shape. And so there are some amanitas that contain toxins and can be fatal. So that's why this one is a level 2. And so this shaggy ink caps, it's a common saprophyte, and it first emerges as a white cylinder. Then it has a white bell-shaped cap covered with scales that eventually open. The gills are white, then pink, then turn black and start to secrete a black inky liquid filled with spores. And this is called deliquesce. And so you can find this one in the spring and fall after rain. It grows on lawns, along gravel roadsides, and waste areas. So, again, be careful. The flavor is mild, and large quantities are sometimes used as the liquid component of risottos, replacing the usual chicken stock. And so, some of the lookalikes, the vomiter, Chlorophyllum mollibides, scaly ink caps are suspected to contain the anabuse-like chemical coprine, which causes a poisoning reaction when consumed with alcohol. So wood bluets, as the weather stays cool, um, you'll we continue to see wood bluets, and so this distinct lilac, they're distinct lilac and purplish pink and start to turn tan, especially on the cap as it ages. And so younger specimens are lighter with convex shape. And then when it matures, the specimen has darker color and a flatter cap. And the gills are what are really like the purple color. So they are attached to the short, stout stem with a bulbous base, usually attached to leaves that they are decomposing, and so they have light pink to white spores. They can be found in the fall through spring, fruiting on hardwood, leaf duff, which it decomposes. So wood bluets have a very distinct odor, which has been likened by one author of frozen orange juice. So fresh wood bluets are great with eggs and breakfast tacos, and as they get older, they become a little more tan and iridescent, and they start to get a little bitter. So sometimes I'll just throw them in my leaf compost because they're such a good composter. And so there is, be warned, because there is a deadly poisonous look-alike in the Cortinarius or webcap family that grows in similar conditions. It's important to do a spore print and also confirm the ID with an expert. The spores of the wood bluet are light pink and white, and the spores of Cortinarius are rust colored. And so we have a really great blog post that you can look at, like different photos of the two species side by side, really get familiar. So now I'm going to go through some pretty uncommon but highly sought after mushrooms that can be found in Texas. So the hedgehog mushroom, it's a spore bearing structure with teeth rather than gills. It grows late fall through the winter after rain. It's considered an ectomycorrhizal fungi with pine, and there's only about 20 observations on iNaturalist in East Texas. So it even contains fatty acids and antioxidants. So I'm not familiar with any toxic lookalikes. So hen of the woods, there's 5 observations, one in San Marcos, which is exciting. Also known as maitake, it's considered a polypore mushroom that grows at the base of trees, particularly old growth oaks and maples, and it typically is found in late summer to early autumn. It's been consumed by centuries in China, Japan, and there's no toxic lookalikes. So wheat lecoche is a fungus that partners with corn kernels to turn them into tasty mushrooms with a delicate earthy flavor compared to truffles. The fungus causes metabolic changes in the corn, which causes a lot more protein and also contains an amino acid called lysine. And its culinary tradition comes from the Nahuatl speaking peoples of Central America and the Hopi of the Turtle Island, who are among those who intentionally encourage the fungus to thrive in cornfields. And so it's a seasonal staple in Central America. Farmers and chefs in the US are embracing this traditional food, and wheat lecoche is finding its way into fields and stores and onto menus. And we've started a program where we give inoculated seeds out, so you can learn more about that on our website. And so it's easy. It's when it's ready to harvest. It once the galls are formed on the corn, and they turn hollowy, and then they turn hollowy and powdery on the inside. And the exact time frame depends on the specific environmental factors, but generally around 2 weeks. And so it has an earthy flavor. Some compare it to truffles. There are endless recipes, tacos, quesadillas, all those sort of things. So the lobster mushroom, there's 26 observations on iNaturalist when I last checked, and it's neither a mushroom or nor a crustacean, but rather a parasitic Ascomycete fungus that grows on certain species of mushrooms, Russula or Lactarius, turning them a reddish orange color that resembles the outer shell of a cooked lobster. And it even tastes like seafood. And so there are some molds that could grow on mushrooms that might look like this, might could be a toxic lookalike to this species, but it is pretty distinct. So the peach fly agaric, or the Amanita persina, is a mycorrhizal fungi that grows with conifers or loblolly pines and deciduous oak and hemlock trees, and can be found in East Texas in late fall and early spring. And so the cap color varies from bright red and fades to yellow to orangish peach. Additionally, the universal veil material is usually present merely as scattered fragments and patches rather than a well-defined concentric rings and zones that characterizes the North American varieties. And so it's very important to note that this mushroom contains a neurotoxin ibotenic acid, which can be decarbolized into muscimol, which is a legal psychoactive compound. And a few studies show it inhibits neural and glial GABA uptake, which helps with depression, anxiety, muscular pain, and promotes sleep. And in the last few years, muscimol has become a popular ingredient in a lot of medicinal mushroom projects. And here in Central Texas, Hometown Heroes is one of the brands in which you can buy magic muscaria gummies. And so some people even believe the myth of Santa Claus is derived from the shamanic uses of the fly agaric mushroom. But that's a whole nother talk. But yeah, Fungi Foundation has cataloged over 200 ancestral and traditional uses of mushrooms, of this mushroom. And some uses are by shamans in the Northern Hemisphere for communicating with spirits, encouraging courage, and inducing altered states of consciousness. So, yeah, so pecan truffles, these are our last two mushrooms. They're found in pecan orchards in association with the tree, and you can fetch about $160 per pound at the market for this mushroom. And so they fruit various times of year. There's not a whole lot of observations on iNaturalist. I've only known of a few people in Central Texas who have found this mushroom. But yeah, really tasty. I finally got to try it last year. Witch's butter, which is Tremella mesenterica, which is a jelly mushroom, very brain-like mushroom. It grows in crevices and of bark and fallen branches, usually right after rain. And so it's very flavorless, but it absorbs a lot of the flavor, and it's used in a lot of Asian dishes, and it's used in a modulating coulis soup with lotus seeds and lily buds and jujubes. And so there's no toxic lookalikes of this one as well. And there's quite a lot of observations of this on iNaturalist. So here are some resources, and a lot of these you can find on our website. So if you think you've consumed a poisonous mushroom, There's a 800 number you can call. There's also a website and a Facebook group for getting help with poisonous mushrooms. So make sure you always take photos, lots of different angles, the top, the cap. Try to get as many images, even where it was growing. Again, that's super, super important. Field guides, mushrooms of the Gulf State. And then we also have mushrooms of North America, which is there's a new one that came out by the Audubon Society of North America. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of Facebook groups. We have our own Facebook group, Texas Mushroom ID, Texas Foraging Community, although they don't do ID. So it's just for sharing what you're cooking or what you're finding. Apps, iNaturalist, I already went over kind of how that works. Mushroom Observer is a really good place. Mushroom Expert, Texas Mushrooms are all really good websites. Clubs and orgs, Central Texas Mycological Society, North American Mycological Association, North Texas, and then Gulf States Mycological Society. So thank you everyone for your time. Become a member. Let's myceliate. Enjoy your foraging adventures, and you can follow me at forage.atx. And I share a lot of my finds on Central Texas mycology as well, but I look forward to meeting you at a walk or upcoming event.